Hello there. This lockdown will not be lifted. It will be gently eased to a barely tolerable level. Firstly, please give this video a like to give my channel a boost, and I'm always uploading new videos, so please do check back daily. Now, the UK public is looking for good news. Good news that will herald a total end to this lockdown and a return to usual normality, just as it was a couple of months ago, as well as saving our livelihoods and finances. But this is not what we're actually hearing. What we're hearing is that we will be going into a second phase, but also that we're going into a new normal. And this includes such ideas as shops opening as long as the 2-metre social distancing rule is applied, social distancing in the workplace and lots of hand washing facilities, and a new bubble concept so that people can meet and mix with a limited number of family members and friends. A new, after the horse has bolted, 14-day quarantine period stable door for people travelling into the UK. Professional sports to be played behind closed doors with regular testing for players and social distancing wherever possible. There is also talk that pubs might be opened, with the number of drinks and the amount of time they can stay being limited for each customer. And will we all have to wear masks in public in future? But it seems that the one thing that would free up many people for work, reopening the schools, will not be on the agenda yet. Something possibly to do with worries that there is some sort of inflammatory syndrome connected to the invisible enemy floating about that affects youngsters. And all this sounds to me like this unlockdown will be a long drawn out affair and a long time coming. And I say that because until schools return to normal, a vast swathe of UK workers will remain locked in their homes. And then talking now about quarantining visitors to the UK for 14 days is not something you just switch on. It will take time to organise, and it will have to be worthwhile doing in terms of the amount of time it is in place. Suggesting to me that if put in place it will be there for a considerable time. Now, before I go on, I'm going to give you some factual and straight numbers from the Office for National Statistics that were published today. These are not made up, they are official figures. Since the start of the year, up to the 17th of April, there have sadly been 34,694 deaths registered in England and Wales where influenza or pneumonia were involved. Note that I say involved, not caused, and these figures are separate from those for the invisible enemy. That is a reduction of 5,794 compared to the rolling 5-year average of 40,488 in England and Wales up to that 17th of April. That equates to a fall of 14% from normal numbers for flu and pneumonia. Or to put it another way, 86% of the normal expected levels. That's from official statistics. And 14% fewer? I was hoping that all that effort would, as a byproduct, have virtually eradicated ordinary flu this year. Because according to the World Health Organization, flu is much less virulent and its mortality rate is much lower. Social distancing has dented those numbers for sure, but I sort of assumed that it would be a reduction of the order of 80 to 90% for flu and pneumonia. At least in the recent few weeks anyway, but that's just not been the case. So if shutting down the whole country and isolating people from each other has only set back the death rate of a relatively passive flu by about 14%, then you do have to ask how much effect it's really had on the dreaded invisible enemy. I mean, if the flu can still maintain a hit rate of 86% during a lockdown, then the much stronger invisible enemy could right now be running at 90 to 95% anyway. Now, I'm not a doctor or an epidemiologist or a statistician, but it does puzzle me. And why isn't the mainstream press asking about this? But whatever the scale of projected casualties, the lockdown is to continue and will be eased in some way at a later date. And according to the Mail, most people in the UK, over 2/3 in fact, want the lockdown to continue until the invisible enemy is fully contained. And it refers to an Ipsos Mori poll and says, support for the lockdown is stronger in the UK than 14 other major economies struggling to cope with the outbreaks of the disease. Only Italy, Russia, China and India had a majority for lifting the lockdown in their respective countries. And the UK Government Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty says there is still a long way to run yet. However, the business community is warning the government that many companies may not be able to survive if social distancing continues after the lockdown was eased. This could, says the business community, affect thousands of businesses and millions of jobs, especially the hospitality sector, which is just about totally built on social contact rather than distancing. On this, the British Retail Consortium is saying that life will still be difficult for retailers after the lockdown ends if they have the added expense of social distance and a reduced income from lower footfall and soft consumer demand. So to keep that sector alive would take more government financial intervention, more borrowing. And I've already talked about quarantining visitors to the country. What will that do to airlines, ferries, the Channel Tunnel and cruise liners? Virgin Australia has collapsed. The Virgin boss Richard Branson is desperately casting about for a buyer for Virgin Atlantic before it goes under, and Airbus is creaking at the seams. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, has put another business relief scheme in place called the Bounce Back Loan Scheme, aimed at small and micro businesses. Companies can now borrow up to, I think, 25% of their turnover with an upper limit of £50,000. But in this case, 100% of the loan is backed by the state, giving the bankers no excuse to refuse the loans. But they are still loans that will have to be repaid. And pubs will be hit badly too with these plans. One lockdown advisor to the government, Professor Isle Winter of Lancaster University, suggests that one way out of the lockdown would be for them to stagger the number of customers over the course of a day and also limit the number of drinks they can have. This, says the professor, will prevent pubs getting stuffed with people at certain times of the day. But all this leads to fewer customers and a reduced income, unless prices are pushed up significantly higher. And remember that many of these businesses will have these new emergency loans to repay, adding more to the costs they face. Now, one of the ideas floated about has been this bubble concept, where we can all have a close set of family and friends of up to about 10 people who we can meet regularly. But how on earth is this to be policed? I mean, it's not like we could end up with 6.5 million lists of people on a government database and accessible by our boys and girls in blue to check, is it? To do that, we'd all have to be tagged and auto-tracked. Or is it all going to be based on trust, and with the snidey help of nosy neighbours reporting offenders to the authorities? Or will a whole raft of busybodies be asked to volunteer or be employed to keep an eye on us via social media and the like? The trouble I have with all of this is that everything I hear being suggested, speculated on or mooted all lead to a long period after the lockdown is so-called lifted, where we are in an almost perpetual state of unnatural semi-lockdown, while we wait in fear for the second wave. And if that went on for too long, would we be facing another lockdown next winter, just in case? Another concern I have is the possible impact of prolonged social distancing on the normal operation of our individual immune systems. Will it weaken my immune system? After an extended lockdown or semi-lockdown, am I going to be more at risk of suffering from other bugs because I've not been out and about mingling with many different people? And there are many other effects of this lockdown that have surfaced during the last 4 weeks, some very unpleasant, both financially and socially. So the time we are under lockdown or semi-lockdown must be limited to the bare essential to achieve the task. Our politicians are going to have to be brave because here is the final conundrum. And this may well be holding back any decision to lift the lockdown. Someone will have to make that decision. Someone. The politicians will want to be seen to be following the science, but the scientists do not want to be wrong. The scientists do not want it to go pear-shaped and have politicians saying, "I was just following the science." Sounds a bit like I was just following orders, doesn't it? I mean, in these circumstances, put yourself in the scientist's shoes. Wouldn't you say, we should wait another week, just to be sure, hoping that the politicians will crack first? Then you can say, well, I did warn them. The temptation to do that must be extremely high. It'll be a game of chicken. And the more I think about it, the more I come to the conclusion that this lockdown will last far longer than necessary. Yes, we'll successfully dispatch the invisible enemy, but the UK economy and social fabric could be very damaged. So will it be a case of operation successful but patient dead? We can't let that happen. At the end of the day, it's the politicians that will have to make the call, balancing all the pros and cons. That's the job they wanted. It may even, in the end, come down to a free, unwhipped parliamentary vote, with each MP evaluating the business, medical and social situation in their own constituencies and voting accordingly. That would be the closest thing to a whole country decision that we could manage at the moment. But we definitely need an ongoing debate on lifting the lockdown. Otherwise, lockdown really could be the new normal. Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe and also press that little bell, or you won't get any notifications. And if you want to see more of me, buy a mug with my mug on it. So what do you think about the lockdown so far? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.